morning, I'm Paolo del Rosario, and welcome to Industry Beacon, where we shine a light on the trailblazers, the disruptors, and the leaders shaping our future. And in each episode, we'll explore how they're staying ahead in their fields, one industry at a time. On this episode, we take a closer look at the trade ties between the Philippines and the UK. Over the years, the two countries have fostered a strong economic relationship, with Britain being one of Manila's major trading partners in Europe. The bilateral trade focuses on a diverse range of goods and services, including electronics and agriculture. This morning, we take a look at what lies ahead for other areas of trade cooperation between the two. Joining us now on the studio is Chris Nelson, the Executive Director of the British Chamber of Commerce of the Philippines. Good morning, Chris. Thank you very much for being with us.
Good morning, Paolo. And it's a great pleasure to be here, and welcome to all your viewers.
And of course, we just want to say thank you very much for being here. You actually have a big event happening tomorrow, which will be the Trade and Connect Forecasting 2025, subtitle being the UK PH Economic Perspective. So it's just a perfect time to have you here. I was looking through the entire program that you have, and a lot of the focus is actually on e-commerce, digitization, and trying to reduce the red tape as well through open access for data. This thrust, this type of priority, why is this going to be a priority for this program?
So look, I think first of all, we've been trying to get more companies to do trade and invest in the Philippines. And the number one, we generally with small to medium-sized enterprises. We work closely with the British Embassy. And those companies have always emphasized ease of doing business. We're an ARTA champion. Mm-hmm. And one of those aspects we feel we strongly support is e-governance. Anything we can do to reduce time, to reduce the red tape would be a benefit. And I think that would resonate strongly with companies back in the UK. I'm sure, as you kindly mentioned, our event, which is tomorrow, where we have a very strong set of speakers, Secretary from Trade, the Trade and Industry, new Secretary, Secretary Roque. Mm-hmm. We have the Secretary of Budget and Management, Secretary Amina Pandangdam. Mm-hmm. And we also have the Undersecretary, Alan Gepti, and our own Ambassador, Lord Bofis, along with the economist from the Philippine National Bank, Alvin Arrego. And finally, of course, we have Monobrero of Tax. And that will be discussed then. But to come back to your point, the thrust is the UK trade between the two countries has grown, but we want to see it grow even more. Mm-hmm. And therefore, passing key acts such as the E-Governance Act and the Cybersecurity Act, we think will foster and improve the ability to do business here.
When you take a look at these particular talk points, these priorities, and looking at our neighbors in the region, is this something that the Philippines has perhaps fallen back on, or has not progressed as quickly as perhaps other foreign investors would have liked?
Well, I think, Paolo, if you've got to look at the overall package, right? So the British Chamber, along with other business groups, has been constantly advocating for opening up the economy. Yeah. To make it further for people to do business ease. And what we've also stressed in many of our media discussions is the fact that we want the Philippines, not only for companies to invest in the Philippines, because in of its own self, it's an important market, but it's also a gateway to Southeast Asia. And linking to that, the Philippines needs to keep expanding and opening. And may I just link it a bit to trade? Yeah. So the Philippines did sign on and ratify the Regional Economic Cooperation Partnership, RCEP, which is an important trading bloc. The other one we know they're looking at, which has got one of the longest acronyms, which is CPTPP.
I wish you could list it all down, but yes, go ahead.
Which is the Pan-Pacific Partnership.
Yeah.
What's important there is the UK's joined. Mm-hmm. So if the Philippines can join, and I know that they're actually looking at that, and that may even be discussed tomorrow, that would further widen areas where the Philippines can do business, and also further cooperation with the UK, because we're already signed on to that particular trading bloc.
Mm-hmm. Now, I know we're looking at very specific parts of the overall trade between the Philippines and the UK, but for those who are not too familiar at the moment, just how big is the presence of UK trade here in the Philippines, and of course vice versa when it comes to the business development happening?
Okay, so the total trade has actually reached an all-time high. It's about 2.9 billion. The particular emphasis is that it's grown. If you look at the five, the leading is electrical miscellaneous goods for most of us. But the actual single one that we've also worked on, number 2, is meat and meat preparations. And that's grown substantially. We're also keen, and the reason it's grown substantially, obviously, is the need here, particularly in terms of food supply, which is a key help on inflation, because obviously the Philippines wants to keep its inflation numbers between the target of 2 to 4%. And for the Philippines, we're also encouraging trade the other way. The Philippines now trades under the developing country tariffs, and we're hoping in March they're going to start actually a further upgrade of the trading relations, which is the Joint Economic Committee. So 2.9 billion is about 60th in the world between the UK, but we're optimistic that could grow more, and the Philippines is a growing opportunity. I mean, let's not forget, this is a country with close to 120 million people, educational skills, a large market in its own right.
You mentioned a while ago that especially when it comes to food security, it's actually a part of the advocacy that you're helping push. It's food security and, of course, managing inflation. And there continues to be a lot of assistance when it comes to British pork, beef, and poultry. And it does help that there is already a lifting of a temporary ban of live cattle and meat products as of October last year.
Correct.
You see the growth of this particular sector. Just how do you feel can the UK aid in basically food security here in the Philippines, and the amount of products actually entering the market coming from the UK?
So if you look at the imports, so if you come back to specifically pork for a second,
I
mean, the demand there is driven also by an issue, the fact that the pig herds in the Philippines are obviously adversely impacted by the African swine fever. The UK is not the largest exporter. I mean, I'll be very clear, there are other countries, but we've grown substantially. For the first 11 months, we're up about 17%, 16% on pork. Beef, this is a much smaller base, but it's up about 17%. But I think more importantly, we work very closely with a trade board back in the UK. It's called the Agricultural Horticultural Trade Board, but we can just use AHDB, as we all like acronyms here. And they have been actually last year 3 times. And I think that's a very important thing, because what we want to establish as the Chamber and as they do is long-term relations. And they are wanting to develop those with the key Philippine importers, such as Atkins. Ramcar actually does a lot as well. We also work very closely with Jess Cham, who's president of the Philippine meat importers. So it's tying those strong relations, and we're looking actually to have further increases in 2025 and on.
Yeah, you know, it just goes to show the point that the Philippines is having a growing reliance on international imports rather, of meat in general. As right now, in the 11-month meat exports, rather looking back the last 11 months, 19% is the rise with the reliance on all of that. Another aspect we want to look at, of course, when you look at the Philippines and the UK, one of the things that the Philippines does offer is obviously tourism. And the recovery post-pandemic hasn't been quite up to the expectations or up to speed, but where can the UK find opportunities here, or where do you see the relationships improving between the UK and the Philippines when it comes to tourism?
And you're correct, Paolo. If you look actually at the recovery in tourism, I think the Philippines, and it's Thailand actually, the 2 countries that not got there, but Thailand has a much higher number of tourists. I think what we need to communicate to, first of all, there's a lot of, obviously, areas to see in the Philippines. Areas that we're not familiar with. Myself, actually, I've been here 20 years. And it was the first time for me to go to Masungi Geo Reserve Park, which just shows you that you need to have visitors to make you go and visit places. We had some visitors from Portugal. I think we can communicate a lot. I mean, first of all, there is obviously a high number of Filipinos who live in the UK, estimated to be 200,000. They're British citizens now. But I think the Philippines can attract, and we need to communicate more. Tell people, and it's not just, as I said, I mentioned Masungi because I've been, of course, because I've been here very long, to Palawan, to El Nido, to Boracay, Bohol, Cebu. I've been actually all around the country. I've been to the north. But there are great areas, but we need to advertise to people that's available. We need to sort of develop, and of course the Philippines is great to come, and the visitors I just had, very friendly, English speaking, so that's a great advantage to a lot of people.
Well, from the UK in particular, according to the DOT, they reported that UK foreign tourists to the Philippines reached 160,000. That's almost
Correct.
a 4% increase from 2023. Still, you look at that number, even though there is an increase, that is a number that I'm sure could be improved on. You take a look at, you mentioned communication. Is that what is lacking when it comes to UK tourism towards the Philippines, going to the Philippines, that perhaps some of the locations here have not been as communicated, as advertised, as marketed in the UK?
I think it's a combination, Paolo. I mean, again, the Philippines is competing. You have people who go to Thailand, Vietnam, Malaysia, Singapore, obviously. So I think what we need to do is the following. Number one, of course, it depends on the routes coming in. Number two, it is communicating. I mean, there is a Department of Tourism. We work closely with the Philippine Embassy in London. We work particularly closely, obviously, with the Ambassador Locsin, with the trade and industry representative there, Michelle Sanchez, but also there's tourism is there. It is about communication, it's highlighting, and frankly also getting to know places that we should know.
Yeah.
I mean, when you live in a country, and I've had the pleasure of living here for over 20 years, you tend to actually stay within your own area, if you understand, your own comfort zone. And therefore I joke, but I think there's a truth that when you have people who visit you, and I have visitors who are with me from Portugal, I have some other visitors who are arriving on the 5th of February. So now it's going to force me to start looking, where can I take them in and around Metro Manila? They will do their own travels around, right? And when they ask advice, it forces you to actually say, okay, what's the best places to go?
Yeah, it's funny because sometimes you don't become a tourist in your own area unless there's a tourist with you.
Oh, I totally agree. I lived in London after university. I worked in London. And only when I was moving did I actually go and visit St. Paul's Cathedral. Because I said to myself, I have to do it because I'm going to actually be living and working abroad. And sometimes you need that stimulus to force yourself to do it.
Yeah, you need that, how do I say this, to become a tourist in your own area.
Correct.
You need a bit of that
and
stimulus.
You need people who come to you and ask you, well, where's the best place to go? And then,
then you think about it, and then you have arguments within yourselves. Yeah, I agree, 100%, absolutely. We talk a little bit about tourism, and Filipinos are actually really competitive when it comes to talking about their neighbors in the region. How does the Philippines compare with regard to UK and obviously ASEAN relations in the region? Is it as attractive as some of the other countries near us?
I think you've got to look historically. I mean, the Philippines has continued to grow. This, I believe, is now the 78th year of diplomatic relations. I mean, clearly the UK had very long-standing relations in Malaysia, in Singapore, for historical reasons. But I think those relations have already developed strongly over the years, right?
Yeah.
And I think the Philippines has attractions. We as a Chamber of Commerce, of course, is constantly advocating, and will always advocate for further opening the country. We say to the Philippines, you have advantages, but we need to keep moving that on. So, look, we look at legislation, and there were passages like the Public Services Act, the Foreign Investment Act. We're very strong supporters of the Anti-Agricultural Economic Sabotage Act, which was passed. And we wish to commend actually the current administration because they're actually taking a really kind of proactive approach to passing legislation. Now, of course, we know elections is in May, so Congress, I believe, will probably finish their sessions in February. So we're still hopeful that they will pass the E-Governance Act. We're hoping to see the Cybersecurity Act get passed. Will it be this Congress or next? And the Open Transmission Act.
Yeah.
The more we keep doing this, the more we can tell to UK companies and people, the Philippines keeps opening up. And I think, therefore, the trade and the investments will grow.
And hopefully that will be the case. We're still here with the Executive Director of the British Chamber of Commerce of the British Chamber of Commerce of the Philippines, Mr. Chris Nelson. We're going to take a quick break. Industry Beacon. We'll be right back. Stay with us. And we're back. You're still watching Industry Beacon here on BNC. Let's continue our discussion with Chris Nelson of the BCCP, because we love our acronyms. Chris, let's take a look at well, you mentioned it a while ago. We actually went back and we started talking about the priorities of the event happening, which will happen tomorrow, the Forecasting 2025 UK PH Economic Perspectives. You ended the last body before we went on break talking more about the priorities, the e-commerce, the digitization, basically these for business and how it could actually help attract more investors. You also mentioned a few of the legislations that you want or wish that the Congress does pass before the session closes in February. You look at the deals, or you look at all of the deals that are in the works right now that excite you, especially when it comes to UK-PH relations. Are there any in particular that stand out?
Sure. I mean, I think, as I said, we work closely with the embassy, particularly with the ambassador, Lord Beaufils. She's a speaker. Also with the regional, the trade and trade and business director, which is Lindsay Gilbert Crouch. And there's a lot of interest in renewable energy. The UK has a fund which is one of the largest investors here this year. Oh, sorry, last year actually, because we've just started this year. And I think infrastructure, renewable energy is of keen interest to investors. And I think infrastructure in particular, because also when you look at the Philippines, and I hope that's going to be one of the key topics tomorrow when we have this event. And that's because also that's a driver for growth. And if you look at the Philippines, the forecast and the hope is to be around 6%.
Yes.
And that's got to be driven by investments, in particular renewable energy, but also in infrastructure, obviously in terms of roads. We've been discussing airports. And let's not forget, hopefully at some point there'll be an underground system in Metro Manila.
Well, it's already in the works, and I believe we're showing a photo of you in a Masungi right now.
Oh, look at me. Look at my hands are up.
Yeah, your hands are up, enjoying the nature. But
it was great, actually. I would recommend to do it. I have to tell you, though.
Yeah, and you did everything.
I was quite tired at the end of 3.5 hours. So it was great, and I would recommend people to do it. I would like to say you have to be relatively fit. I mean, there are other ways to do it where you don't have to quite do that, but it was very enjoyable. Here I am, look at that.
Look at that.
And the view
nice
is
tan
great.
And everything.
But again, I think it highlights there are things in the Philippines and it makes you feel good when you've done it.
Yes.
But yes, I mean, coming back on your point, what's interesting into the UK is definitely renewable energy and the drive there. Also in terms of potential infrastructure projects. I think also cybersecurity. There's a lot that can be offered to the Philippines. The UK is one of the leaders on cybersecurity. The other thing I'd mention is I just had a call last week. We have a UK's trade commissioner. His name is Martin Kent, for covering this area. He's based in Singapore. He was here, he's been here at least twice. And I think, again, he was talking about the opportunities and trying to develop. And the Philippines, I think in that area can do so much more, because what we like to see here is accelerating the growth, right?
Yes.
And those, I think, are the key targets for the government, along with, of course, bringing down inflation, or keeping, to be fair, inflation has come down. The target of Banco Central Filipinas is between 2 to 4%. If they can do that, then obviously there's an opportunity on the interest rates, which I think are currently 5.75. We say that because growth in countries like here is obviously much more than in developed countries. I mean, you're not going to get 6% in the UK or in Europe.
That's very true. Of course, there's so much we can touch on, but we have to focus on a couple due to the interest of time. You mentioned the renewable energy. In general, by the way, British companies are listed as one of the top 4 investors according to the top Ecozone Locator investments from 1995 to 2023 with 7.06%. The thrust for the increase of renewable energy, the Marcos administration in particular has a goal of reaching a certain percentage of the energy mix, increasing the energy production, renewable energy production in the Philippines. Is that probably one of the most exciting or interesting rather points of investment for the UK, or is it still going to be in infrastructure?
Oh, I think it's in both areas. I mean, I attended, so in October last year, there was a Philippine economic briefing in London. The mission was led by Secretary of Finance Recto. He also had representatives, including the Special Advisor Go. You also had the Director General from PEZA, so Tia Panga. Mm-hmm. And the reason I mention all this is that they gave a very good presentation. So renewables there, infrastructure was there. But let's not forget, we also deal with small to medium-sized enterprises who could be interested in food, drink, the consumer market. The point is, the Philippines has a lot of opportunities both ways. The reason I also say this is we're competing with others. We have to keep on working extremely hard to do that, right? So do I believe companies are interested? Yes. I also think it's very important that we keep on pushing and opening the economy as much as we can. So for example, I know there's a discussion in Congress to increase the number of years lease that companies can have from 75 to 99. That's an improvement. Of course, we'd like to see companies with the ability to own their land, right, where their factories are. The reason I raise all this is we saw improvements, and in all credit, in the Duterte administration, they passed the Public Service Act, Foreign Investment Act, and then, of course, Marcos administration, President Marcos continued that, and we're very pleased to see that passage. We need to keep it going, and we need to be able to communicate, and I would like to commend the Philippines for the Philippine Economic Briefing. I think you use that to attract a lot newer people there. I attended, it was a very good session, all credit to the Philippines. But we need to do more. We just can't stop. And I would just encourage everybody to keep doing it as we would. And I would encourage them to go to the UK again every year if possible.
Absolutely. And with that, I wish I had an hour with you instead of the brief 20 minutes I've had because there's just so much we could discuss. We even haven't touched on the football, which I know you're really interested in. But
well,
of course,
thank you very much for mentioning. I have to just say quickly on that, my team is currently at the bottom, that's Southampton Football Club. But we believe in hope, miracles. Let's see at the end of the season. We hope.
I'm a Manchester United fan, and it's the worst time to be a Manchester United
good
fan.
Luck to your team, and good luck to mine.
Good luck to yours as well. Ladies and gentlemen, that is Chris Nelson, the Executive Director of the British Chamber of Commerce of the Philippines. Really appreciate you being here.
Thank you very much, Paolo. It's been great talking with you.
All right, so that is it for today's show. I'm Paolo del Rosario. Catch the Bilateral News channel on Free TV, channel 31, and on cable via Signal, channel 24. Thanks for watching the Bilateral News channel, always on top.